Echoes of Humans, Beliefs and Perspectives. Chapter 6, Buddhism. The great river basins of India provided relatively easy conditions for sustenance and reflection. By this was facilitated the birth of the Harappan civilization, the Vedas, and the Buddhist religion. Stretching over a millennium was the growth of Buddhist philosophy, firmly set in the wider context of Indian philosophical inquiry. Buddhism is one of the richest episodes in the history of Indian chronicles, an intricate web of schools, thinkers, texts, concepts, and symbols. From the scholasticism of Abhidharma to the emptiness of Madhyamaka, from the idealism of Yogacara to the epistemology of Dignaga. A credible forerunner of Buddhism was the ancient Shramana movement. It existed in parallel to, but separate from the Vedic development. Shramana meant seeker. Its adherents followed austere monasticism, which contrasted sharply with Vedic ritualism. Jains, Ajavakas, and Karvakas were also influenced by the Shramana concepts. Their common allegiance, however, barely concealed the differences among these sects. From fatalism to free will, to accepting or denying the idea of soul, from idealization of asceticism to family life, to even the dress code. From its earliest times, Buddhism postulated the recurrence of Buddhahood, that Buddhas have lived in the past and are the faith's lifeblood. As the concept is wide, it does not refer to a single expounder, unlike Christianity, where the focus is on the person of the founder. Buddha is a descriptive, not a proper name, meaning the awakened one who has overcome ignorance and to no attachment is prone, implying that most people live in spiritual slumber and are unaware, in fear and ignorance wrapped, not knowing how things really are. Gautama was said to be born without the impurities of the earth. His mother was said to be standing under a sal tree at his birth. Upon her death, she was reborn in the heaven of 33 deities. Gautama was brought up by his mother's sister with all the royal amenities. At 29, Gautama cut his hair and donned the robes of an ascetic. This incident became a symbolic precedent for the early peripatetic. The sight of old age, sickness, and death tore Gautama apart. The palatial joys could no longer becalm his troubled heart. After forsaking Kapilavastu, Gautama endured 6 years of extreme asceticism. He became so emaciated that his hair lost its capacity for renewal. Against all the temptations of Satan-like figure, Mara, he won, achieving enlightenment at 35 and becoming the awakened one. At his awakening, the spiritual aggregation of his past lives came to fruition of rebirth, karma, and four noble truths. He now had direct cognition. For him, arising and ceasing of desire was a particularly important revelation. Henceforth, his followers would try to achieve this through mindfulness and meditation. He taught that neither things exist forever nor are now existent. They are like a red leaf which upon a green leaf is dependent, neither entirely different nor ever wholly the same. All things arise in dependence as flame upon a flame. 49 days after Nirvana, he laid out his first principles during his sermon on the Four Noble Truths to his disciples. This sermon has been passed on as Buddhism grew and prospered, first as a part of the oral lineage and then as a written text. The teachings of Buddha, extending from the day of his enlightenment to his death, have nurtured the Buddhist philosophy and all the concepts of the faith. Nuanced interpretations may have led to the formation of different sects, and the great Nagarjuna may even have taken a liberty or two with the extracts. Gautama taught when the ideas of Brahmanism were the dominant philosophical source. Through his critiquing, he came to be seen as a countervailing force. For him, there was no caste, nor was there any god or deity. However, he retained the concepts of karma and rebirth in his philosophy. It is surprising that Buddha's views did not lead to any violent reaction. The inclusive nature of Hinduism may have been a reason for this reception. Gautama did not have any political pretensions, like Muhammad in his later years, nor was Gautama seen as a threat, as Jesus was, by his peers. The Sangha, or the community of monks with Buddha as its teacher, emerged as a group with a shramana-like life as its feature, a monastic existence that forswore extremes and followed the middle path principle between the ascetic jains and the indulgences of ordinary people. The certitude of the Four Noble Truths is the core of the Buddhist thought. Buddha taught in his first sermon that life with suffering is fraught, that suffering is caused by desire, which needs to be conquered and forgotten. It is through the Eightfold Path that this siege of desire can be broken. The Eightfold Path can be conceptualized as a three-part teaching, the cognitive and volitional part comprising right resolve and right understanding, the ethical part consisting of right speech, right livelihood, and right action, and finally the meditative part of right effort and right concentration. Buddhism sees no need for a creator or first principle in the universe. There is no beginning to the world, nor the cycle of birth and death. It also sees no theological problem with the coexistence of evil. Evil is created by our faculties, which are duplicitous and venal. Buddha was willing to recognize the limitations of human vision. He sought a middle way between dogmatism and skepticism. He emphasized personal experience with regard to reality and truth, a pragmatic attitude and critical thinking guiding every pursuit. Along with Buddha, Sangha, and Dharma are recognized as three refuges. The Dharma is the pattern of reality and orderliness around us. It is also applied to the principles and teachings of Buddha. The essence of Buddhism lies in the reflection and practice of the Dharma. In their meaning as the phenomena and the constituents of reality, the Dharmas, in Abhidharma Kosha, are listed and examined in totality. They are momentary forces, each arising in a firefly-like appearance. They last for a while, and only then can have an existence. The three marks of life are dukkha or suffering, anatta or not self, and anicca or impermanence. To overcome these, one must first accept the limitations of existence. This recognition precedes action which can make the cure possible. A realistic mindfulness is needed to make redemption feasible. The larger message of these three marks is the universality of suffering. This means a basic dissatisfaction that permeates all conditional calling. According to Buddhism, the true cause of suffering is not sin but ignorance, unlike other faiths, where it is the willful abandonment of providence. In Buddhism, ignorance, simply put, is not understanding something fully. Since they cannot view things completely, the humans are prone to folly. Like so much else in Buddhism, there are different tiers of human discernment. Addressing these multiple levels is the goal of religious engagement. Another concept of Buddhism is that of skandhas, or the aggregates of clinging, the 5 material and mental factors that assist the origin of all craving. These are form, sensation, perception, mental activity, and consciousness. They are also considered as markers of sentient beings' presence. In Buddhist philosophy, there is no room for absolute truth. The objective is to be rid of unawareness so that we can rightly choose and prevent truth from deteriorating into absolute truth and all it implies. It is only in their ignorance that humans are ensnared by absoluteness all their lives. When asked whether self exists or not, instead of answering, Buddha remains silent. Not self, a primary concept in Buddhism, aims at overcoming attachment. This not self becomes a force to overcome the skandhas impress. And finally, upon enlightenment, there is no need for self or even not self. Buddhism sees every phenomenon as a part of a conditional process. Unlike Advaita, it sees no need to postulate a permanent self. Belief in such a thing can only lead to yet another rebirth. This confirms that clinging is very difficult to reverse. The path can only be reversed with the liberation from the world of agony through the extinction of the fires of greed, avarice, and acrimony. There are nirvanas with remainder and those which are remainder-less. The nirvana with remainder is like a dying flame leaving behind embers. Parinirvana, or nirvana without remainder, is the second type. This is a state of complete closure which one enters upon demise. The embers have been cooled, and with it, future existence extinguished. The great chain of causation has been put to rest and dismissed. In the Buddhist tradition, the concept of mindfulness is also important. It means non-judgmental awareness of our experience at a particular moment, or the study of momentary sense impressions as they begin and end. This concept is particularly prevalent in Tibetan Buddhism and Zen. Karma in Buddhism is not specifically Buddhist, nor is it its most crucial part. Unlike Hinduism, it does not see it in ritual or the duties of caste. It is seen as inherent in the nature of action, like a law of science. It is the intention behind action, which is the bearer of karmic presence. Thus, in Buddhism, the focus on karma shifts away from physical action. It is intention alone, which has a moral character that sets off reaction. The past, along with the current mindfulness, shapes our present. This also leaves the door ajar for free will engagement. In Buddhism, there is a graded order of teachings to meet diverse requirements. The Upaya Kaushalya, or the skill and means, helps in these multiple arrangements. The teachings are adapted commensurate with different levels of comprehension. In this way, a spiritual maximum is sought to be achieved for each human condition. Upaya Kaushalya helps in softening the stringency of the Buddhist moral code. It aids adherents to access more easily the teachings that are espoused. This measure of spiritual expediency, which is added to compassion, helps people even if what they follow is not the truest reflection. Tripitaka, or Three Baskets, is thought to be the oldest canon, first recorded in Pali. It is particularly revered in the Theravada tradition. For Mahayana schools, however, it is not the only convention. For them, writings in Sanskrit, Chinese, and Tibetan are also a valid progression. The first basket, Vinaya Pitaka, contains rules and regulations. It assists the members of the Sangha to keep at bay myriad temptations. The second, Sutta Pitaka, contains the historical Buddha's doctrinal teachings. The last, Abhidharma, facilitates comprehension of their meanings. The Sutta Pitaka was orally rehearsed at the first Buddhist council. When it came to be written in Pali, it was done with a moving grandeur. Of the other Buddhist texts, some are philosophical and some earnest ideas unveil. Some recount legends and some only historical detail. Early in the faith, it is probable that the main focus of devotion was the tree or its cuttings under which Gautama sat in meditation. Later, stupas, or reliquaries, became objects of worship and veneration. The relics which were kept there were said to have some sacred association. In the Brahmanical system, each word of Vedas is regarded as sacred and revealed. Buddhism, however, permits its disciples to interpret teachings as they perceived. Another way to look at it is that the great diversity of its sagely advice is able to address the varied needs of a sentient being's life. Buddha's actual words, or Buddha Vachana, have always been a matter of contest. This was driven largely by the needs of each period and its particular intellectual content, which texts, in essence, were true and which fell somewhat short. Each sect created its own idea of what the Buddha actually taught. In Ashoka's reign, Buddhism spread far and wide, both inside and outside India, from Gandhara, Kashmir, and northern Kanara, to Thailand and Sri Lanka, constructing innumerable stupas. Ashoka gave Buddhism a central place in his empire, just as later, Constantine had set off events for the church to prosper and aspire. During the immediate period after Buddha, no sectarian issues emerged. The sight of Buddhist monks parleying with non-Buddhist sects was commonly viewed. The monks defended their doctrine against the learned from other extractions. With time, however, differences arose even among Buddhism's own persuasions. The first schism in the Sangha occurred 100 years after Buddha's death, when at the Second Council, the more conservative chose a different path. They were called Stavaras, or elders, as against the Mahasanghikas, or the liberal majority. The latter had a much more lenient attitude towards monastic rules and authority. In the ensuing centuries, Buddhism split into no less than 18 schools. Each school had its own interpretation of Buddhist teachings and rules. The canons of only two schools are available in the extant texts, that of Theravada in Pali and that of Sarvastivada in Chinese and Tibetan scripts. On one side were Sthaviras, or elders, from whom emerged three important schools. They were Sarvastivada, Theravada, and Pujalavada, with their own nuances and rules. Later, Sarvastivada itself branched into Vaibhashika and Sautrantika sects. On the other side were the Mahasanghikas, with their Madhyamaka and Yogacara compacts. It was in their Abhidharmas, or commentaries, that the greatest divergence was discerned. Each school had its own Abhidharma, which its followers learned. The early Abhidharmas were not philosophical in nature, unlike the later. The later ones introduced innovations going beyond the canonical literature. The Abhidharmas are considered the foundational texts on Buddhist sutras. Their aim is to systematize doctrine and shed light on the more obscure passages. A part of almost each Abhidharma is quite scholastic in its submission. It challenges hypothetical objections to protect its own position. Of the three baskets at the heart of Buddhism, Abhidharma is the third. It is held that Buddha taught Abhidharma to disciples who were more learned. The Sri Lankan Theravada later added more Abhidharmas to its tradition. Included in this was Buddha Ghosa's Visuddhimagga, or the path of purification. Moggallpita Tisa's Kathavathu is also regarded as an important Abhidharmic sequence. It refutes all doctrinal heresies, including the absolutist perspective. Kathavathu is a complete rebuttal of views hostile to the Theravada vision. It is one of the 7 recognized Abhidharmas of the Theravada tradition. The Theravada Abhidharma in Pali provides an understanding of the reality as it evolves. This is done in terms of dharma, or factors into which each thing dissolves. The dharma theory is the central maxim of Theravada expression. This Abhidharma also provides useful tools for thinking and meditation. Dharmas are the elementary constituents of all phenomenal experience. They are analogous to atoms but are more a psychological presence. They are not seen as substances or essences, but depend on the supporting conditions. They are caused by Dharma's earlier appearances. As compared to other traditions, Theravada is quite unique in one sense. It considers Abhidharma to have emerged from the supernatural expanse. According to this, Buddha thought out the Abhidharma upon his enlightenment, taught mortals and higher beings alike because he wanted their betterment. Later, the concept of quasi-theistic form of Buddha arose, meeting an important need. After losing the historical Buddha, people needed somebody to intercede. This view of Buddha as transcendent resulted in the premise that all humans have Buddha's seed in their existence. Like all Buddhists, Sarvastivadins consider the empirical to be impermanent in nature, but their dharmas combine momentariness with existence in past and future. Sarvastivada became influential in the regions of Central Asia and Kashmir. It enjoyed the patronage of Kanishka, the Kushan emperor. Of all the early Buddhist schools, Sarvastivada was the most dominant. It had somewhat of a contrarian approach to the central Buddhist tenet. Its belief in cause and effect at the same moment is one of its aspects. It was closer to Pudgalvada than to the mainstream Buddhist sects. The subgroups of Vaibhashika and Sautrantika were Sarvastivada's two main offshoots. Vaibhashikas saw themselves representing the more orthodox attributes. On the other hand, the Sautrantikas believed in the primacy of momentariness. They felt that the Vaibhashika position was a violation of the principle of impermanence. Pudgalavada, another sect of Sthaviras, was popular for 1,000 years. For the Pudgalavadins, personhood is not a mere conceptual construct that disappears, but represents a real and ultimate fact of a sentient being, straddling across time and answerable to the karmic calling. Across the spectrum of Buddhist thought, Pudgalavada found resonance in the Yogacara idea of fundamental consciousness, also in Tathagata Garbha, which posits an enlightened core in every jiva. Pudgalavada used the doctrine of the person to account for rebirth, karma, and nirvana. In Buddhism, Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana represent the three sub-traditions. Theravada's self-image is that it follows original teachings without distortions. It claims to the sole inheritor of the early Buddhist canon and tends to be more conservative in its interpretation of Buddha's vision. In early Theravada, there were 4 stages of awakening to highlight comparison: that of stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and an awakened person. The stream enterer is the one who has only recently started his sacred journey. The path before him is full of conundrums, which he has to tread carefully. The once returner is the one who has drained delusion to a degree. The non-returner, having overcome sensuality, no longer returns to the worldly debris. And finally, the arahat, who has shaken off all the mortal fetters and achieved pure enlightenment with his unremitting efforts. For the Theravada practitioner, never to be reborn is the primary aspiration, to escape the wearisome cycle of life and bury the clinging creation. An arahat is often compared to a fire that has been extinguished. This happens only when all the fuel of existence has been completely expended. During the centuries on either side of the beginning of the Common Era, new interpretations arose under the auspices of Mahayana. While Theravada did not allow the early teachings to be even marginally skewed, in Mahayana, a more compassionate relationship with the faithful was pursued. Mahayana brought about a shift in its approach to the ethical goal. Theravada had only propagated individual development and self-control. The Mahayana felt this aspiration of Theravada was too self-centered and inadequate. It replaced it with altruism embodied in the bodhisattva state. In Mahayana, Buddha is regarded as not having completely disappeared after death. He is, in some sense, present to assist the human beings in their quest. The solitary search of the Theravada monk is replaced with a possibility for all. This is a kind of religious democratization meant to serve every call. Buddha himself never stressed the bodhisattva ideal as the goal of his teaching. That is why the Theravadins regard Mahayana as guilty of overreaching. The bodhisattva ideal recognizes the equal importance of wisdom and compassion. However, the path to becoming a bodhisattva may take eons to happen. Mahayana did not overwhelm the land as if there was a vacuum in reflection. A highly developed culture of thought already existed, with many thinkers commanding attention. The upshot was a syncretic mix of Buddhist ideas and the extant forms of deliberation. Many other beliefs also prevailed because of the very nature of oral tradition. Madhyamaka and later the Yogacara emerged out of the Mahayana tradition. The Madhyamaka was founded by Nagarjuna, a Sankara-like icon. His insight was that the early Buddhist scriptures, if properly viewed, can only lead to the conclusion that everything is with sunyata, or emptiness, imbued. Nagarjuna argued that though something exists in experience, it is only in a relative way. It may be wrong to deny it exists, but at the same time, there is no substance in play. It can be described well in terms of dharma, but with a difference. It is a passing interdependence with no being in an absolute sense. Nagarjuna argued that emptiness completes rather than subtracts from veracity. For a bodhisattva, this knowledge is a matter of aspiration and necessity. Nagarjuna sees causality as observed regularities in an essence-free world. Human comprehension cannot go beyond this, however, well served. Nagarjuna claimed that the round of existence leads one to a startling conclusion, that nothing, not even the great Buddha, existed independently of some condition. Nagarjuna was not a nihilist. He postulated two truths with differences: the absolute truth of emptiness and the relative truth of appearances. Nagarjuna's causality meant that everything arose from dependent origination. The endless ropeway of causes eliminated the absolute from the equation. Within samsara, everything came to exist because of a prior cause. Not to existence, but to inherent existence, Nagarjuna gave an eternal pause. To the Hindu mind, Nagarjuna's dependent origination felt like an act of apostasy. As in the Brahmanical system, the Atman is around for eternity. Nagarjuna avoided this mystery of setting forth something unprovable. He went on to explain phenomena as arising, ceasing, and mutable. For Nagarjuna, emptiness itself is an abstraction, an epistemological ultimate. Thus, emptiness itself is empty without having any superior mandate. The phenomenal world cannot be dignified with anything but a provisional existence. Its characters always reeling without the holding hand of permanence. Before Madhyamaka, the doctrine of emptiness was only to not self-referred. Now the domain of emptiness expanded and all phenomena was included. This was a radical step, and it is hard to imagine its revolutionary importance. The idea of dharmas, dependent but existing, was reduced to just a reference. Once the absolute was banished and deprived of philosophical support, Nagarjuna was free to tap the pure mountain waters to advance his thought. He could now reflect on the life of man in freedom and in bondage, and postulate what he thought was Buddha's real message. Nagarjuna wrote Mulamadhyamaka, where the tenets of the middle path are defined. The work reveals the dazzling sweep of Nagarjuna's mind. His aim was to refute the scholasticism that Abhidharmas had laid out, to recover unblended the teachings that the Buddha had pronounced. But who knows how the historical Buddha would have reacted to this kind of content? Metaphysics was not dear to him, and sunyata was a metaphysical concept. Buddha did not seem to regard metaphysics as conducive to holy living. For him, Nagarjuna's interpretation may have even seemed forbidding. The Madhyamaka school is based on the Sutras of Perfection of Wisdom. Realization of emptiness is the conceptual core of this system. While generosity, morality, patience, and meditation are all necessary, they only find their consummation with this kind of wisdom as the intermediary. Nagarjuna's reductio ad absurdum is somewhat similar to Socrates' elenchus, but unlike Socrates, he offers no escape. At each step, he asserts emptiness. In contrast, Socrates' method, at least, leads to an improved state of not knowing. Each premise may be refuted, but successive outcomes carry greater meaning. After Nagarjuna was the great triumvirate of Madhyamaka commentators. Buddha Palita, Bhaviveka, and Chandrakirti emerged as eminent scholars. Buddha Palita's arguments were shaped by prasangika, or reductio ad absurdum methodology, which was to stretch each argument till it reached its natural fallacy. Bhaviveka introduced now dialectical tools for Madhyamaka's exposition. The prasangika had to be supplemented by svatantrika, an independent proposition. Just refutation on its own was not enough to settle a debate. A positive thesis was also needed to decide an argument's fate. Later, Chandrakirti challenged Bhaviveka's method by calling it fragile. He felt a debate could only commence if some later convergence was seen as possible. The two parties must have the same understanding of the starting premise. An irreconcilable start will only make the debate a futile exercise. The debates in ancient India would sometimes become spectacles of great amusement. The winner on occasions was made to ride a caparisoned elephant. The loser would be daubed with ochre or chalk on the face, and the unfortunate ones would even be driven into the wilderness. 2 centuries after Nagarjuna's Madhyamaka came the Yogacara denomination. 2 Gandharan brothers, Asanga and Vasubandhu, were behind this tradition. Unlike Nagarjuna, whose early association with Mahayana can easily be traced and found, these two had their philosophical grooming in a non-Mahayana background. In Yogacara, which means practice of yoga, the mind enjoys preeminence. Humans totally depend on it as it interprets sense experience. Every aspect of our cognition is essentially a part of mental activity. Through mind only, the spokes of the human wheel find their identity. According to Vasubandhu, people seek the absolute because of uncertainty. It provides a safe haven from the onrush of fear and anxiety. The world is fundamentally mind-only, but a remedy is available. That remedy is in yoga, which makes coexistence with relativism possible. Yogacara is known for alaya vijnana, or storehouse consciousness. In alaya vijnana, the karmic seeds are teeming with their presence. They may seem dormant, but there is an interplay involved in each action, making the moral terrain of our past and present a single compaction. The three turnings of the wheel developed by Yogacara gives us a structure to help understand the sutra stream and its teachings in full measure. In addition, the concept represents three main events in Buddhist history that shaped the course of this faith over its long journey. The first turning was at Sarnath, where Buddha conceived the Four Noble Truths. The second came a long time after Buddhism had set out its first statutes. The second turning embodied the perfection of wisdom, sutra, and sunyata teaching. The third came with the conviction that enlightenment is possible for each being. While both Madhyamaka and Yogacara see themselves as part of the Mahayana tradition, Madhyamaka is more dialectical in dealing with questions of human condition. Yogacara, on the other hand, emphasizes samadhi or meditative concentration, leading to the withdrawal of mind from all sensory perception. In Madhyamaka, all things lack essence. In Yogacara, mind is essence. Yogacara's mind-only approach is seen by some as vexatious. There is a risk of descending from emptiness and forming an attachment. In this way, Yogacara may not be complying with Buddhism's most crucial element. In another sense, though, the two may be seen as similarly patterned, both playing a role in the desubstantiation of the world. Unlike some Abhidharmas, Yogacara does away with the concept of matter. In its place, it sees in existence an overarching mental character. In Mahayana, another sect came into being, which was somewhat atypical. It came to be called Vajrayana, or the Thunderbolt Vehicle. It aimed at achieving nirvana in one lifetime, rather than in eons, giving to the followers an alternative path and purpose. Vajrayana works within the framework of the Mahayana Bodhisattva ideal, seeking to help people in lesser time to unyoke from life's grinding wheel. The emphasis in Vajrayana is on highly symbolic language and rituals. These distinguishing features set it apart from other Buddhist schools. Vajrayana grew out of the Mahayana tradition during the 7th century. Its inspiration came from the universities of Vikramshila and Odantapuri. These were set up by the Pala dynasty of Bihar and Bengal. From there, it traveled to Tibet and became very influential. With time, Vajrayana added facets of Tantrism and the local Tibetan-born faith. In dispelling demons, the Bons used shamans to make their case. Vajrayana also began to incorporate tantric mudras, or ritualistic postures. Along with this came mantras or sacred speech with arcane features. There are other elements of the Tantra which feature in the Vajrayana doctrine. These include the esoteric transmission and affirmation of the feminine, the use of taboo substances like blood and semen in devout communication, and the daily recitation of Dharma texts for visualization. In Vajrayana, many holy beings were seen as women, affirming their high position. In its approach, Vajrayana gave them a lot of actual and mythical attention. The mandalas were used to portray the world of a particular deity. These represented the nature of the Pure Land and enlightened morality. Apart from the classical Mahayana Buddhist practices like the 6 perfections, Vajrayana also includes the 6 dharmas from scholar Naropa's collations. Then there are others seen as transcending even Tantrism, such as utmost yoga or dzogchen. The main language of Vajrayana's scriptural studies is classical Tibetan. Vajrayana's concept of deity yoga involves meditation on a selected deity, whose mandala may include attendant Buddhas and other objects of piety. The texts of Naropa on dharmas often assist the tantric engagement. It is an advanced application used as a valuable complement. In Vajrayana, Dzogchen, sometimes also called the Great Perfection, is a highly respected movement. It is revered as the highest and most definite path to enlightenment. It aims at achieving and existing in the ultimate realm of existence, where the pristine state of mind finds its true fulfillment. Vajrayana, in spite of its unconventional approach, remains within the ambit of Mahayana Buddhism. Its foundation is firmly rooted in the Four Noble Truths and altruism. If that was not so, the purpose of Tantras would be rendered futile, imperiling the whole process, and making Vajrayana look rather juvenile. According to the Vajrayana masters, man's body is actually a psychophysical presence. It comprises a mind, channels, and inner air, or subtle winds. Human body can be compared to a city in which channels are like cities' roads. The winds represent a horse and the mind, a rider who goads. In Vajrayana, visualization of self as a deity helps to raise awareness. The practitioner achieves this through meditation on bodhicitta and emptiness. Such a visualization helps in overcoming any sense of inadequacy, making us feel that we are the deity which is imbued with divinity. The greatest triumph of Mahayana was achieved outside the Indian homeland. Buddhism's unthreatening outlook was conducive in this respect and helped it to expand. Buddhism's tradition is amenable to interpretations suitable in different contexts. In this way, it was easier for it to coexist with outside conventions and texts. This peaceful nature of Buddhism's spread in Asia is without a peer. Its philosophy was welcomed as something that did not actively interfere. Even Hinduism, which saw it as a rebel, could not ignore its attraction. By the 6th century, Buddha came to be recognized as Vishnu's incarnation. The story of Buddhism in Southeast Asia began with the Dharma in Sri Lanka. The form of Buddhism that Mahinda brought from India was Sthaviravada. This led to Theravada, and it spread over nearly a millennium. Buddha's discourses became an integral part of the Sri Lankan culture and system. The Sri Lankan king, Devanampiya Tissa, became Theravada's first great patron. He founded the Mahavihara monastery, with which he had a long association. He planted the seedling of the Bodhi tree and built a great stupa there, known as Thuparama. Buddha's collarbone is said to be enshrined there. The Silk Route made possible Buddhism's initial diffusion in Central Asia. This transmission was conducted through the passes of northwest Himalayas. Kumarajiva was the most illustrious translator of this region. His translation of Mahayana works into Chinese made a deep impression. In Japan at different times, Zen, Tendai, and Nichiren Buddhism enjoyed ascendancy. Zen came to be known for its simplicity and pragmatic tendency. It de-emphasizes knowledge and favors practical learning under a teacher. This is unlike some other sects where abstract learning is a regular feature. In Tendai and Nichiren sects, the Lotus Sutra occupies a foremost position. The Lotus Sutra believes that all the faithful are capable of salvation. This comes about with the aid of innumerable bodhisattvas and their grace. The Theravada salvation through the Eightfold Path is assigned a lesser place. In the narrative of Lotus Sutra, the lifespan of Buddha is immeasurable. Thousands of worlds, each with its own Buddha, are suddenly made visible. Nichiren believes that all the living beings possess the Buddha nature, which bestows faculties making possible enlightenment in future. In East Asia, Pure Land Buddhism is followed like a devotional cult. It believes that there will never be a world which is not corrupt. Rebirth in another place called Pure Land or Sukhavati is the objective. The prayers to Amitabha are done keeping in mind the common man's perspective. With time, the long tradition of Buddhist philosophy in India got less and less attention. There were many factors in play which led to this situation. Sankara led the Hindu resurgence, and the Muslim invasions dealt a crippling blow. Even the Palas, their fealty to the debilitating caste system, had to show.